now there is a drawing session. Brandon, would you take the microphone? Yeah. Yes.
There are some information which is important. The drawing will happen behind those doors. And there are tables from each and everybody. We need to stand a bit crowded because there is not that many tables. So I would like you to go out in the entrance and then behind the sliding doors, and then there are the tables with pencils and paper, and you will draw from here. So it's important that let everybody see the stage and the screen. And after, there is a possibility for everybody to have some other things than the coffee to have from the bar. But then you need to pay for yourself. I'm so sorry for that. But there will be wine, there will be beers, there will be, I don't know, if you want to have even stronger things, it should be available. Okay?
If they want to draw here, they can.
Yeah. So Brandon says that if you want to draw, you can do it here, but it's maybe some easier to have a table. So yeah, but we're opening. Yes. So we have both pencils, which we bought half an hour ago, and also the papers. Just pick things. You have the microphone. To be the boss, because I don't want to be the boss now. You can lead.
Brandon, yes. Michael. Good to meet you. Oh,
Port left.
it is
Oh, did you have a chip here? Or do you... No, probably.
This one?
Yeah. No, that's for the remote.
Oh.
Ja, men jeg har nok tatt den. Men det ligger ingenting her. Nei, nettopp. Det er greit. Ja, jeg har den her. Ja. Okay.
Can we turn the mic on? Okay. All right. Can everyone hear me? We're good? Okay. All right. If I can have everyone's attention really quickly. So this drawing tutorial, I know all of you are at probably different levels of your classical understanding of architectural elements and the orders and different things along those lines. But since I know all of you probably did not come prepared with rulers and drawing compasses and a number of things, we're going to basically go through a tracing exercise with these drawings. So all of you should have a copy of two different drawings. One is this, which is the classical moldings themselves. The second one is the Doric order, the capital and the column base. And so we're going to be reviewing these together. First off, we're going to start with the classical moldings. Now, before we get started, just a couple of words here. Earlier, we were talking about applying ornament, right, to the moldings themselves. And so this is one of the things that some of those areas where you could apply certain types of architectural ornament. Now, the moldings are the alphabet. These are the letters, and we use these to then compose. We take these letters, and then we compose them in an actual architectural order. And so we're going to learn those letters of the alphabet really quickly, and then we're going to go through and apply those to one of the classical orders. So on your sheets, you'll notice there we're categorizing, let me pull that down, categorizing the moldings into a couple of categories. So we've got the straight moldings, convex moldings, concave moldings, and then compound moldings, which are the most complex. So we're going to start with our straight moldings. So those that are going to be following along here. The first off that we have is the fascia. And so if you go ahead and trace that, one of the things that I am going to encourage you to do is, as we're cutting this, if we're to envision we're cutting through this, I'd go ahead and put a couple of diagonal lines here to help us visualize what's actually happening, how that molding is protruding from the wall or from a flat surface. So there's our fascia molding. Next is a fillet molding. And a good way of thinking about the fillet is if we were to draw a square in here, right? It's kind of a one-to-one relationship. But we're going to go ahead and add our diagonal lines there. So this is our raised fillet molding. Next, we have our sunken fillet. So we're just looking at the inverse of the original one, of the raised. Next, we have our splay moldings. And so there we can kind of envision what we have with all of our straight moldings. Our fascia, our raised fillet, our sunken fillet, and our splay. Now, when we get to the convex moldings, one thing that you're going to notice with all of these is that we're dealing with circles. And so when we start with the first convex molding, this is the ovalo. And what do you notice about this? How much of the circle is it using? A quarter. So this is a quarter round molding. And then from there, we're just going to increase the percentage of the circle. So go down to the torus from there. We're going to trace that, which is a half round. And then from the torus, then we increase another quarter of a circle. We go to the 3/4 round. We add our diagonal lines there to show that we're cutting through that. And then lastly, with our convex, we also have our, when we combine a series of toruses, right, the half rounds, those are known as individually as a bead, but when we put them together, they are reading. And so we'll go ahead and trace those. Add our diagonal lines so we can visualize what that is going to look like when we're cutting through that. How are we doing so far? Okay. Now, with our concave moldings, think of it as we're basically doing the inverse of the convex. So we're going to do the quarter round is a cavetto. Another way of thinking about that with the translation is a small cave. So we can start to visualize what these concave moldings are going to be. Next, we have the half hollow. With our half round. And then we have our 3/4 hollow. Now, once you've got through those, our next one is a little more complex because we're dealing with two circles. So this is the Scotia molding. And what you're going to notice with this is that there's the two circles. So let's say we have the larger circle, and then if we use half of that for a smaller circle, we're able to have basically a small cavetto, right? This quarter there. And then from that point, we have the larger circle as it brings it all the way down. Now, there are always a lot of variations on how we can put these moldings together. So this is just one of the ways that the Scotia molding is conveyed. And last, we have the conge molding, which you're probably thinking, well, that looks just like the cavetto, because it's a quarter of the circle. but we'll show you the difference of that when we get to the classical order. But usually you have a flat surface that's transitioning up, and that's why we have this conge molding. Okay, so from there, we are finally getting to the most, kind of the most complex or compound moldings. And so with that, the first one we're going to draw is the cyma recta. So the cyma recta, one way of thinking about it is we have here two circles side by side. And if you're looking at the cyma reversa, the difference is the circles are stacked on top of each other, okay? Now, cyma rectas are usually used as a kind of a crowning element. So if we have our entablature, this is our crown molding. If you look here in the room, at the top here, we have that same molding. We have the cyma recta. And so to draw that, with our two circles, we're taking a quarter round on one of them, another quarter round. So we're basically creating a sine wave. And then we'll dash that in so we can see that better. So that is the molding that is here in the room, running around. Now the cyma reversa is opposite, where we have the two circles stacked on top of each other. So once again, we're using a quarter of one of the circles, a quarter of another one, bringing that back down. And the cyma reversa is a molding whose function acts as more of a supporting role. So it's supporting a lot of weight that's coming down. It's transitioning things. So how are we doing so far? How did we do with our moldings? Am I going too fast? We're at a good pace? Okay. All right, so from there, once you've finished that, I'd like you to transition over to the Doric capital and the base. And I'm going to zoom in on just the base first. Okay. So with the base, you'll notice a number of things here. On the sides, I've labeled some of these moldings, but we have our fillet, we've got a bead, we've got our torus mold, we've got a plinth. And so when you're thinking about the classical orders, everything takes its measurements from a single module. And that module is the diameter of the column itself. So if we're looking here at the column, we're going to call that D. And if we start dividing that column into 6 parts, we go and take an additional part on either side, and that's what gives us how wide the plinth needs to be. So I'm going to have you start with the plinth and go vertical with that. You can do that on both sides. And if we were to carry an imaginary line up from that, we can see the edge of the torus molding that's lining up with that. And so if we go ahead and draw the torus molding, and above that, if we take the center line of that circle and we carry that up, that then gives us the center for the bead. And if we had more time, I'd talk about all these other subdivisions, but they're all derived from the diameter, that module. Then we go straight up from there. We have our fillet. And then we use a quarter round to basically transition to the shaft of the column. So we can do this on both sides. And then from there, we can go ahead and strike our horizontal lines where those moldings will create a line. And voila, we have drawn the Doric column's base. Now, one thing that's important with that to note is that this column base, right, we've already established the diameter is an important measurement. The top, the height of that base is 1/2 of the diameter. So here on the side, we have the diameter, we split that in two, we take a line across, and that gives us the height of that column base, those base moldings. So we're going to shift now to the column capital itself. Now, with the column capital, the first thing you're probably noticing is that it is more narrow or skinnier than the base, right? So we had the one diameter for the column base. Up here at the top, we reduce that to 5/6 of the diameter. So here on the top, you can see we've divided that into the 5/6D. And so we're going to take those vertical mold shaft up on both sides, vertical lines. And then right before we hit this part, which is called the astragal, you'll notice that we have this little quarter round. And so earlier on, remember we talked about the conge molding, and that's where we're shifting and transitioning. Then we have a small fillet on either side. We have basically a bead. And we're doing that on both sides. Now, one thing you should also note, just as we did with the bottom, the base, with it being 1/2 the diameter for the height, we're doing a similar thing here at the top. So if we take the diameter of the column, we split that in 1/2, we take that line across, and that actually gives us the top of the astragal. So if we take those lines across, now from there, if we continue going vertical, one thing that sometimes a thing that I notice a lot of my students and others kind of make this mistake is that line of the shaft of the column, if we dash that up, it will actually vertically line up with the necking. So if we continue that vertical line, we're going to come to another conge, a fillet, a bead. Then we have the echinus, which you're saying, wait a minute, wasn't that another name? And yes, so it's basically the ovalo. And then from there, we have a flat fascia component. And then, what is that little molding there at the top, where the abacus is? Which compound molding was that? You can shout. Yes. That is our cyma reversa, our cymatium. But that is a supporting molding. So remember we talked about how it's supporting the weight. And this is not the crowning element, because we would then have a beam, the entablature, coming on top of that. And so this is bulging out because it's supporting all of those elements. So we go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. Continue tracing our conge, fillet, bead, echinus, our fascia, our cyma reversa, and then our fillet again. And then go ahead and strike your horizontal lines for those. Okay. And from there, we've drawn the Doric column capital. Yes, this is the Roman Doric. Thank you, Professor Curl. So with this, a couple of things just to point out as you're looking at your drawings. If you notice where we took the shaft of the column up to the necking, if we continued that line up, that is where the line of our entablature would start, where our beam would sit. Oftentimes you'll have contractors or builders try to push this out and line it up with the edge of your column. And while yes, you can do that with modern materials, and sometimes it is done, the more appropriate way, according to the Roman canon, would be to line that up directly on that. So I have on YouTube a number of drawing tutorials where I actually walk you through these kind of same drawings where you're using a compass and a ruler. So if you would like to look at those, you can write down Vitruvian Man Architecture. That is my YouTube channel. So you can find some of these other drawing tutorials. I walk through the Ionic, the Corinthian orders, as well as the entablature and the block orders, a number of different things. So hopefully this tutorial was helpful. We only had 30 minutes, so we kind of had to go rather quickly, kind of a tracing exercise, but hopefully you can see those kind of proportions and relationships, and also see that the classical orders are really comprised of these alphabets, these letters, to create the classical orders. That's all. Thank you.